Hello, Honors. These videos in this series will help us to review our final unit, unit number 6, on the theme of the home. I've rescheduled our essay on the theme of the home until Monday, December the 14th. It was originally for Wednesday the 9th, but since we're all e-learning now, I'll have the e-learning day on the 7th be for our personal narrative essay, and then the very next Monday on the 14th be this final grade for our course, and that will be the Unit 6 test, and it's an essay test. And so you should have downloaded online for you virtual students. You in-class students receive this copy from me, Unit 6 theme of home essay test. Leading questions to explore: what does it mean to call a place home? In what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? And then we have 9 works of literature listed here. I may go ahead, since we're e-learning, and cover a few more of those tertiary works than I have on here in case you want to pick some of those. But we have Back to My Own Country by Andrea Levy. This video will talk about that one. And then Shooting an Elephant by Orwell, A History of the English Church and People by Bede, The Seafarer, Dover Beach, Escape from the Old Country, The Widow at Windsor, From Lucy, England Lady, and then in the tertiary section, online edition, My Old Home, and I may add a few more. So the instructions were to compose a 5-paragraph in-class essay. It said aim for 3 handwritten pages, 2 double-space typed for virtual and quarantine students. Well, that's all of us now. So all of us, 2 pages typed, double-spaced, to submit on the Google Classroom. As your test for Unit 6, Victorian and Modern Ages in Literature with the theme of the home. Your essay should consist of an intro paragraph that introduces the importance of the home theme. Next, the 3-body paragraphs will be about any of the above 3 works of literature you choose to help you answer either or both of the leading essential questions from the unit. What does it mean to call a place home? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? You may discuss 1 work per body paragraph, or choose 3 subtopics that you come up with to explore, and then weave those 3 works that you pick throughout all 3 body paragraphs. It's a little bit harder to do it that way, but if you do it that way, I'll give you a 5-point bonus. If you don't need it on this grade, maybe you'll need it on your vocabulary test or another grade that you had. Finally, the concluding paragraph is a first-person narrative about what home means to you. In your response, be sure to answer 1 or both of the leading questions. What does it mean to call a place home? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? Okay? So our first work on here is the essay prose selection called Back to My Own Country. Andrea Levy's Back to My Own Country, an essay, discusses her experience as a Londoner of Caribbean heritage. Having been born and raised in Great Britain, she had always thought of herself as completely British. She had been identifying with the white community and living in denial of her true identity as a black woman in a white society. A visit to Jamaica opens her eyes to a culture and history she had not known existed. She becomes aware of the British slave trade and the important economic role of enslaved Caribbean Africans in funding Great Britain's Industrial Revolution. Levy notes that it is time to place Caribbean history in the main narrative of British history. So reading this work, Back to My Own Country, an essay, really allows us to participate vicariously in Andrea Levy's personal journey of discovery. Born in London, she's raised by parents who are determined, though, that she was going to be assimilated into the culture of Great Britain rather than that of the Caribbean. And so we really should feel sympathy for her as she is rudely awakened to the true nature of home. That home is not necessarily just where we are, but it also has to do a lot with our cultural identity as well. So our connection to our essential questions, why is the idea of home important? I think we'll observe that Andrea Levy was motivated to explore the idea of home by the realization that she was really part of a culture different from the one that she recognized. And that insight made her to reconsider some ideas about herself as well. So the Back to My Own Country, an essay in your textbook, begins on page 691. You have a picture there of the Empire Windrush, which was the ship that is so very important in her essay. I remember a journey I took on a London bus when I was a young girl. It was in the early 1960s. The bus was full of people, and one of them was a black man. This was not a common sight in those days. I could tell from his accent that, like my parents, he was from somewhere in the Caribbean. He was talkative, smiling politely at people and trying to engage them in chant, but all the other people on the bus were white, and they were looking at him askance. Nobody would be drawn into the conversation. But then later on, she says that such a thing wouldn't exist today because there are so many immigrant people, so many people who have been part of the British Empire who have moved to London itself, that London is a very, very mixed culture now. And so such a thing is not quite as common where somebody would be looked upon as an outsider the way that they used to be. So our class read the selection here. It's a rather lengthy essay. And then we got to page 699, and we looked at our comprehension check question. So let's turn there. If you have not read that selection, you're a little bit behind, because on our daily summaries, I've told you what we have been doing every day. So if you've been at home and haven't been keeping up with the selections, this is the week to start doing that, okay? And to start reading and catching up so that you'll be ready by next Monday to be ready to write your essay, okay? So here we go. On page 699, according to Andrea Levy, why would the opening incident on the London bus not happen that way today? Everyone now in London is used to a mix of cultures, and London buses are full of Londoners from all over the world. Number 2, what was the status of the author's parents when they were living in Jamaica? How did that status change when they got to England? Well, in the Caribbean, she said her parents were middle class or upper middle class. They grew up in very large houses. Her mom was a teacher. Her father had a good job. They even had servants there at home. But in England, they were immigrants and they were outsiders, and they had to live in council housing, which is a low-cost housing area. When Levy was growing up, why was she indifferent to Jamaica? Well, her parents raised her really to assimilate into that British culture. Caribbean culture was not a prevalent part of her life. She grew up not knowing much about it at all, and really didn't want to be any different from the rest of her friends. She wanted to assimilate into the culture. Most of her friends, she said, were white. She was a light-skinned black lady, and so as she grew up, she really didn't identify with black people because in the Caribbean, she said, skin tone made a big difference. The lighter-skinned black people associated with each other, the darker-skinned black people associated with each other. And so when she thought about the Caribbean, all she thought about was a culture that she really had no part of whatsoever. Why did the author resist being called black? She was expected to isolate herself from darker-skinned people, and it seemed perfectly normal to her that the color of her skin was one of the most important things about her. So she grew up somewhat with a little bit of an uppity attitude about other black people and thinking that she was a little bit finer than they were. Well, when she got to London, everybody looked at her as black. And so she was kind of taken aback that they really didn't feel she was part of their culture. It didn't really process to her in her young mind or even in her teenage mind, but as she got to be an adult, she began to see how things really were and to wonder, well, what about that other part of my heritage then that I've neglected all these years? Number 5, why is Levy now happy to be called a black British writer and to write about her Caribbean heritage? Well, now she's happy to be called a black British writer because she realizes that does not limit her imagination. In a way, it defines her, but in a way, she has moved beyond being defined by anybody else's labels on her. And then in number 6, write a summary of Back to My Own Country, an essay to confirm your understanding of the text. So just to put it very simply, the essay tells the story of the author's childhood and the events that led her to understand her identity as a writer and as a black Caribbean British citizen. Her journey to accept herself is detailed through a series of painful encounters and realizations. Her experience first was an anecdote about a black Jamaican riding the city bus. During the encounter, the author comes to realize that blacks and whites were regarded very differently in London in the 1960s. This leads to a series of growing experiences that eventually result in a major turning point in her life. In a workshop for her job, she discovers that her co-workers consider her black. despite the fact that she saw herself as white. She has seen herself as everyone else has, and this shakes her now to the foundation. The rest of the essay details how she finds her roots, she finds her family heritage, and she finds her identity through writing and discovers her place as an advocate for the Black Caribbean experience. So that's our first work that we had that will go along with our theme of what is home and what does home mean to us and how do we fit in. Shooting an elephant will be covered in another video. And there, Mr. George Orwell, of course, who's better known for the novels 1984 and Animal Farm, was a British soldier. And in Shooting an Elephant, he is not comfortable being a British soldier here in Burma. And so he has really an essay about feeling displaced from one's real home. So I hope you join me for the rest of the videos in this set, and maybe they'll help you a little bit, spur your mind about what you can write about as you write on the theme of the home.